My name is Declan Foster. I'm 32 years old, and until 3 weeks ago, I was a petroleum engineer based in Houston. I say was because I don't know if I'll ever be able to return to that life again. Not after what happened on that deserted stretch of Route 66 in New Mexico. I'm writing this down while it's still fresh in my mind, partly as evidence, partly as therapy, and partly as a warning to others who might find themselves driving alone through the desert at night. It started with a job reassignment. My company needed someone to inspect equipment at a remote drilling site near Gallup, New Mexico. The trip was supposed to be straightforward. Fly to Albuquerque, rent a car, drive west along Interstate 40, do the inspection, and fly back. Simple, but nothing went according to plan. My flight was delayed by 6 hours due to mechanical issues, meaning I landed in Albuquerque close to midnight. The rental car company had given away my reservation, and the only vehicle they had left was an ancient Jeep Cherokee with suspicious stains on the upholstery and a check engine light that flickered like a dying firefly. I was tired, irritable, and seriously considering finding a motel and starting fresh in the morning, but my boss had emphasized the urgency of the inspection. Equipment worth millions was sitting idle, and every day of delay cost the company thousands. So I took the Jeep and headed west on I-40, planning to drive straight through to Gallup. The highway was nearly empty at that hour, just the occasional long-haul truck and the vast, star-filled New Mexico sky for company. Around 2 a.m., I noticed the gas gauge dipping toward empty. The next main service area was still 50 miles ahead according to my GPS, but a small dot on the map indicated some kind of establishment just off the old Route 66, which ran parallel to parts of I-40. I took the exit, following a worn sign that promised gas, food, 2 miles. The road narrowed immediately, the smooth interstate giving way to cracked asphalt that hadn't seen maintenance in years. My headlights caught the faded remains of the iconic Route 66 shield painted on the road, now just a ghost of America's past. The promised gas station materialized out of the darkness, a single pump establishment with a small convenience store attached. The fluorescent lights buzzed and flickered, casting an unnatural blue glow over the cracked concrete. No other vehicles were in sight. I pulled up to the pump and got out, the silence of the desert hitting me like a physical force after hours of road noise. The door to the store jingled as I entered. Behind the counter sat an elderly Native American man with deeply lined skin and eyes that seemed to look through me rather than at me. "Evening," I said, placing a 20 on the counter. "Just need some gas and maybe a coffee if you've got it." He nodded slowly. "Pump first, then pay. Coffee's fresh. Made it when I saw your headlights coming down the road." Something about his statement unsettled me. The store had no windows facing the direction I'd come from. How had he seen my approach? "You're far from the interstate," he commented as he poured the coffee into a styrofoam cup. "Where are you headed?" "Gallup," I answered, accepting the coffee. It was surprisingly good, rich and strong. "Got work there in the morning." He studied me for a moment. "Taking Route 66 all the way?" "No, just needed gas. I'll head back to I-40. He shook his head. "Road's closed about 5 miles ahead. Accident with a chemical truck. They're saying it'll be morning before it's cleared." I felt a flash of annoyance. My GPS didn't show any closure. "Just happened," he said with a shrug. "These things don't update instantly out here in the desert, but you can follow Route 66. It'll take you where you need to go. Longer, but at least you'll get there." I thanked him and went outside to pump the gas. As the numbers on the old mechanical pump slowly clicked upward, I pulled out my phone to check for road closures. No signal. I walked around the building, holding my phone up, but couldn't find even a single bar of reception. When I returned to pay, the old man was studying an ancient television behind the counter that was showing nothing but static. "No signal out here," I said, gesturing to my phone. He didn't look away from the static. "The old highway will take you there. Keep your eyes on the road, though. It's a dark night." "Any wildlife I should watch out for? Deer? Coyotes?" I asked, thinking about the Jeep's questionable brakes. Now he did look at me, and something in his gaze made my skin crawl. "There are things in the desert that don't have names, mister. Things the old people knew to fear. The moon is almost full tonight." I forced a laugh. "Right. Thanks for the warning." As I turned to leave, he called after me, "Stay in your vehicle no matter what you see or hear, and don't stop until you reach the lights of Gallup." I walked back to the Jeep, telling myself the old man was just messing with the out-of-towner, playing up the mysterious desert angle for his own amusement. Still, his words had left me with an uneasy feeling that the hot, bitter coffee couldn't quite wash away. Back on Route 66, I found myself on a narrow two-lane road that stretched endlessly into the darkness. The Jeep's headlights seemed feeble against the vastness of the desert night. The radio picked up nothing but static, so I drove in silence, watching the odometer slowly tick upward. About 20 miles in, I noticed something peculiar. A large shape by the side of the road, illuminated by my headlights for just a moment as I passed. In my rearview mirror, I could see it was a car, an older model sedan, pulled over with its hood up. I slowed down, debating whether to turn back and offer help. The old man's warning echoed in my mind, but I couldn't just leave someone stranded in the middle of nowhere. I made a U-turn and pulled up behind the vehicle. As my headlights illuminated the scene, I realized there was no one visible around the car. I honked once, then twice. No response. Against my better judgment, I got out, leaving the Jeep running. "Hello?" I called. "Anyone need help?" Only the whisper of the desert wind answered me. I approached the car cautiously. The hood was up, but when I peered inside at the engine, I saw nothing obviously wrong. No steam, no disconnected parts, nothing that would explain why someone would abandon their vehicle. I checked the interior next. Empty. Not even personal belongings. Just an old air freshener dangling from the mirror and a light coating of dust on the dashboard that suggested the car had been sitting for more than just a few hours. A prickling sensation crept up my spine. Something wasn't right. I scanned the surrounding desert, but in the darkness I could see little beyond the pool of light cast by my headlights. The vastness seemed to press in around me, and for the first time, I became acutely aware of how alone I was. A sound broke the silence, a distant mournful cry that could have been the wind through rock formations, or perhaps a coyote. But something about it raised the hair on my arms. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. I hurried back to my Jeep, suddenly eager to be back on the road. As I reached for the door handle, movement caught my eye. Something large shifting in the darkness beyond the reach of my headlights. I froze, straining to see. The cry came again, closer this time, and unmistakably not the wind. It started low and rose to a pitch that no coyote or wolf I'd ever heard could make. A sound that seemed to vibrate in my chest and send ice through my veins. I jumped into the Jeep and locked the doors, my heart hammering against my ribs. Through the windshield, I could see nothing but the empty road and the abandoned car, but the feeling of being watched was overwhelming. I put the Jeep in gear and accelerated away, faster than was safe on the unfamiliar road. In my rear-view mirror, I thought I saw movement again, a large shadow crossing the road where the abandoned car sat, but it was gone so quickly I couldn't be sure it wasn't just my imagination, fueled by the old man's warning in the eerie desert night. For the next hour, I drove without incident, though every shadow seemed to hide potential threats, and every rock formation looked momentarily like a crouched figure. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that the isolation and the late hour were making me jumpy. I even managed to chuckle at my own nervousness. Then my headlights caught something in the road ahead. A massive shape sprawled across both lanes. I slammed on the brakes, the Jeep's tires skidding on the loose gravel at the road's edge, before coming to a stop about 20 feet from the obstruction. At first I thought it was a fallen boulder or perhaps debris from a rock slide, but as my eyes adjusted, I realized with horror that it was the carcass of a cow, or what remained of one. The animal had been torn apart, its ribcage splayed open and emptied. Blood darkened the asphalt in a wide pool around it. This was no roadkill. No vehicle collision could have done this kind of damage. This was a kill, and recently too. The blood still glistened wetly in my headlights. I sat paralyzed, hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. There was no way around the carcass. The road was too narrow, with steep ditches on either side. I would have to move it. The thought of getting out of the Jeep made my stomach turn, but I couldn't sit there all night. I inched the vehicle forward until my headlights fully illuminated the grisly scene. Then, taking a deep breath, I opened the door. The desert air hit me like a slap, carrying with it the metallic scent of blood and something else, a musky animal odor that made my nostrils flare. I approached the carcass, trying to breathe through my mouth, looking for a way to drag it aside. That's when I noticed the tracks in the blood. Large prints, far too big for a coyote, leading away from the carcass and into the desert darkness. They weren't quite wolf prints either. The shape was wrong, almost like a distorted human handprint, with long, curved impressions that could only be claws. My mind rejected what my eyes were seeing. There was no animal native to New Mexico that could leave tracks like that or take down a full-grown cow with such devastating efficiency. A sound from the darkness beyond the road, a scraping like claws on stone, sent me scrambling back to the Jeep. I slammed the door and locked it, fumbling with the keys in the ignition. The engine roared to life, and I threw the Jeep into reverse, backing away from the carcass. As I did, my headlights swept across the desert scrub beside the road, and I caught a glimpse of something that stopped my breath in my throat. Two reflective eyes set high off the ground, staring back at me from the darkness. They were large, amber-colored, and unmistakably predatory. I slammed the Jeep into drive and swerved around the carcass, tires skidding in the blood and gore. As I accelerated away, I glanced in my rearview mirror and saw a large shape emerge from the darkness and pause over the carcass. In the fading red glow of my taillights, I could make out only a silhouette, hunched, massive, with what looked like pointed ears or horns rising from its head. Then I rounded a bend, and both the carcass and whatever was feeding on it disappeared from view. I drove at dangerous speeds down the winding road, convinced that at any moment something would leap out of the darkness at my vehicle. Every curve revealed new shadows that seemed to move. Every rock formation transformed momentarily into a crouched predator. After what seemed like an eternity, I saw lights ahead, a small cluster of buildings that the map on my dashboard identified as the outpost of Continental Divide. Relief flooded through me at this sign of civilization, even if it was just a small trading post and gas station. I pulled into the parking lot of what appeared to be a 24-hour convenience store, its fluorescent lights a beacon in the desert night. An old pickup truck was the only other vehicle present. I parked directly under one of the bright lights and sat for a moment, trying to calm my racing heart and make sense of what I'd seen. It had to be a mountain lion, I told myself. They could take down cattle, and in the dark, with adrenaline pumping, I might have misjudged the size and shape of the tracks. The eyes could have belonged to any nocturnal animal. The strange silhouette was just a trick of the light and my overwrought imagination. But deep down, I knew I was lying to myself. What I'd seen hadn't been any natural predator. I needed to report the cattle kill, if nothing else. The rancher would want to know, and maybe the local authorities would have some explanation that would help me sleep better. I went into the store, where a young Navajo woman was reading a paperback behind the counter. She looked up as the bell jingled. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said, marking her place in the book. "Not a ghost," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "But I found a dead cow on the road back there, about 20 miles east. Looked like something had been feeding on it." Her expression changed subtly. "You came all the way from Albuquerque on the old road? At night?" I nodded. Interstate was closed, apparently. Chemical spill. She frowned. "I haven't heard anything about that, and we usually get word of major closures." She reached for a radio behind the counter and spoke briefly into it in Navajo. After listening to the response, she looked at me with new suspicion. "Highway Patrol says the interstate is clear all the way to Gallup." A cold feeling settled in my stomach. Why had the old man lied to me? "There was something out there," I said, changing the subject. "Something big. It killed that cow, and I think it was watching me." She put down the radio. "Probably a mountain lion. They come down from the mesas sometimes when food is scarce." "This wasn't a mountain lion," I insisted. "The tracks were all wrong, and it was too big. It was standing on two legs." At this, her expression became guarded. "Look, mister, I don't know what you think you saw, but there's nothing out in that desert except coyotes, the occasional cougar, and maybe some feral dogs." But there was something in her eyes, a flicker of recognition, perhaps even fear, that told me she knew more than she was saying. Is there a sheriff's office or police station nearby? I asked. I should report what I saw. Sheriff's deputy comes through once a day, usually in the morning, she said. You can wait if you want, but I'd recommend getting back on the interstate and continuing to Gallup if that's where you're headed. It's only another 40 miles. Her tone made it clear she wanted me gone. I bought a coffee and a sandwich, then returned to my Jeep. As I sat there eating, I noticed the young woman on the phone, glancing at me periodically through the store window. She seemed agitated, gesturing with her free hand as she spoke. I finished my meal and decided to follow her advice to get back on the interstate. I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd stumbled into something the locals knew about, but didn't discuss with outsiders. As I pulled out of the parking lot, I saw a dust cloud approaching from the direction I'd come. Headlights bouncing along the uneven road. An old pickup truck pulled into the lot just as I was leaving, and in my rearview mirror, I saw several Navajo men get out and hurry into the store. One of them looked directly at my departing vehicle, his expression unreadable in the darkness. Back on Interstate 40 with its wide lanes and occasional passing trucks, I felt some of my tension ease. I tried to convince myself that what I'd experienced was simply an encounter with local wildlife, magnified by darkness, isolation, and the suggestive warnings of a bored gas station attendant. But every time I closed my eyes, even just to blink, I saw those amber eyes staring back at me from the darkness. I reached Gallup around 5 a.m. and checked into the first motel I found. Despite my exhaustion, sleep eluded me. When I did drift off, my dreams were filled with blood-soaked asphalt and massive, distorted shadows pursuing me through an endless desert night. The next day, I completed my inspection at the drilling site in a fog of fatigue and lingering unease. My colleagues noticed my distraction but attributed it to the long drive and lack of sleep. I didn't mention what I'd seen. Who would believe me? I had planned to stay another night in Gallup before driving back to Albuquerque for my return flight, but the thought of another night so close to that stretch of Route 66 was unbearable. I made an excuse about a family emergency and booked an earlier flight, driving back to Albuquerque on Interstate 40 in broad daylight with a death grip on the steering wheel. I thought that would be the end of it, a strange, frightening experience that would gradually fade into a bizarre anecdote. I was wrong. 3 days after returning to Houston, I received a package at my apartment. No return address, just my name and address printed on a plain brown wrapper. Inside was a newspaper clipping from the Gallup Independent, dated 2 days after my encounter. The headline read, "Local Rancher Missing, Foul Play Suspected." The article described how Thomas Begay, 58, had failed to return home after going to check on his cattle near the Continental Divide. His truck had been found abandoned on an access road with signs of a struggle. Blood found at the scene was confirmed to be human. The article mentioned that several of Begay's cattle had been found killed in the preceding weeks, in what authorities were calling unusual predator attacks. Paperclipped to the article was a handwritten note on what looked like gas station receipt paper. "The skinwalker has your scent now. It won't stop until it finds you. Next full moon, it will come for you. A friend." I crumpled the note and threw both it and the article away, telling myself it was a sick joke, perhaps played by the old man from the gas station who had sent me down that road in the first place. But that night, I dreamed again of amber eyes and blood-soaked asphalt. I woke to the sound of scratching at my bedroom window, 17 floors up. When I checked, there was nothing there. But the following morning, I found long scratch marks on the building's exterior wall beneath my window. I convinced myself it was maintenance workers, or perhaps damage from a recent storm. But deep down, I knew better. Over the next 2 weeks, strange things began to happen. I would wake to find mud on my apartment floor, though I hadn't been outside in the rain. My doorman reported that someone had been asking for me in the middle of the night. A tall man in dirty clothes who smelled like a wet dog. 3 times I found dead birds on my balcony, arranged in a pattern that seemed deliberate rather than random. And each night the dreams grew more vivid. No longer just memories of what I'd seen, but new terrors. A massive wolf-like creature with an almost human face pursuing me through familiar places. My office, my childhood home, the Houston parks where I jogged. Always pursuing, always just a few steps behind me. Its hot breath on my neck as I jerked awake, sweating and gasping. I began researching Native American legends, specifically Navajo folklore. What I found chilled me to the bone. The skinwalker, a witch who can transform into an animal, most commonly a wolf or coyote. According to the legends, once a skinwalker has your scent or possesses something of yours, blood, hair, a personal item, it can track you anywhere. Some accounts claimed they could even read their victims' thoughts and appear in their dreams. I told myself it was coincidence, that my research was influencing my dreams, creating connections where none existed. But as the full moon approached, marked ominously on my calendar by that anonymous note, my denial became harder to maintain. The night before the full moon, I checked into a hotel under a false name, telling no one where I was going. I bought silver bullets from a specialty ammunition dealer, a purchase that earned me strange looks but felt necessary after reading that silver was one of the few things that could harm a skinwalker. I loaded them into the handgun I'd owned for years but rarely used, then barricaded myself in the hotel room with the weapon close at hand. I didn't believe in monsters, I told myself. This was just a precaution against a very human threat. Perhaps someone from that community who was using local legends to frighten me for reasons I couldn't fathom. As night fell, I positioned myself in a chair facing the door, gun in my lap. Hours passed. Midnight came and went. Outside, clouds occasionally obscured the nearly full moon, visible through my window despite the city lights. At approximately 2:17 a.m., the exact time I'd encountered the cow carcass on Route 66, according to the timestamp on my dashcam footage, I heard something in the hallway outside my room. Not footsteps, but a soft, scraping sound, like claws on carpet. I raised the gun, aiming at the door, my hands shaking so badly I could barely keep it steady. The scraping stopped directly outside. For a long moment, there was only silence and the pounding of my heart in my ears. Then came a smell, the same musky animal odor I detected in the desert, seeping under the door and through the ventilation system. My eyes watered and I had to fight the urge to gag. A low growl vibrated through the door, so deep I felt it in my chest rather than heard it with my ears. The door handle jiggled, then the entire door shuddered as something heavy slammed against it from the other side. I fired through the door. 1, 2, 3 shots in rapid succession. The silver bullets punched through the wood, and I heard a high-pitched yelp that was neither fully animal nor human. Then silence. Heart racing, I approached the door and looked through the peephole. The hallway appeared empty. I waited several minutes. Then, gun still raised, I carefully opened the door. The hallway was deserted, but the carpet was stained with dark fluid leading toward the stairwell. Not red blood, but something darker, almost black in the dim light. Without conscious thought, I followed the trail, drawn forward as if in a trance. The trail led down 3 flights of stairs and out an emergency exit that was propped open with a fire extinguisher. Outside, in the hotel's rear parking lot, the trail disappeared on the asphalt. As I stood there, gun hanging limply at my side, I heard a sound from the darkness beyond the lot's edge. A pained whimper that turned into something like a human moan. I raised my phone to use as a flashlight, pointing it toward the sound. In the beam's weak light, I caught a glimpse of movement. Something large dragging itself into the deeper shadows between 2 dumpsters. Before it disappeared, I saw what looked like a twisted, half-transformed shape. Part wolf, part human. Its fur matted with the same dark fluid that had stained the carpet. Hotel security found me there minutes later, standing frozen, gun in one hand, phone in the other, staring at the empty space between the dumpsters. They called the police, who questioned me about the gunshots. I claimed I'd fired at what I thought was an intruder, technically true. They found no blood, no evidence of anything struck by my bullets, and no strange creature. Just 3 bullet holes in my hotel room door and my increasingly unbelievable story. I was detained briefly but released without charges after the hotel decided not to press the issue. The police report described me as disoriented and paranoid, possibly under the influence of drugs or alcohol, though tests showed I was sober. In the days that followed, the dreams stopped. The strange occurrences at my apartment ceased. I began to convince myself that stress, sleep deprivation, and suggestion had combined to create a kind of temporary psychosis. that I'd imagined or at least greatly exaggerated everything that had happened. I was ready to put it all behind me, to write it off as an bizarre episode best forgotten. Then exactly one lunar cycle after my night on Route 66, I received another package. Inside was a Polaroid photograph of me standing in that hotel parking lot, taken from the darkness beyond the edge of the asphalt. On the back, written in what looked like dried blood, were 4 words, "See you next moon." That was 2 days ago. Tonight is the next full moon. I've fled to a location I won't disclose, surrounded myself with every protection mentioned in the folklore I could find. Silver, ash wood, protective symbols. I've written this account as a record and a warning. If I survive the night, I'll continue running with each lunar cycle, hoping to find a way to break whatever connection was forged between me and the thing I encountered in the New Mexico desert. If I don't survive, well, at least now someone knows what happened to Declan Foster, who took a wrong turn on Route 66 and encountered something that should not exist in our rational modern world. Something that ancient peoples knew to fear. Something that still hunts under the light of the full moon. The sun is setting now. I can see the full moon rising on the horizon, and somewhere out in the darkness, I know it's coming for me again.